Well, you may notice something different today. You may have noticed that we've traded in our 12 by 12 small room that we normally film in for something a little bit bigger, something a little bit nicer, and with a few more special effects. And hopefully the wind's not too bad and you can hear us well this morning. And the reason we're doing this is not just for the novelty of it. The reason we're filming out here today is because we want to talk about our personal worship with God. We want to talk about this intimate relationship that we can have with God and this connection that we have with Him. And for me, one of the places that has been just such a central place of that in my life has been the beach. For most of my life, I've lived less than 30 minutes away from the beach. And I've lived in St. Petersburg, I've lived in Miami, I've lived around the Cocoa Beach area. And so anytime things were kind of getting to me, anytime there was a lot on me, I could just escape really quickly to the beach. I could go and I could think and clear my head. I could go and sort of listen for God's voice. I could go and I could sing songs to Him, sort of quietly, but lifting Him up in song and in prayer. And I could just connect with Him in a way that was just sort of special. And so for me, the salt air, the sound of the waves, the sand, everything about it just sort of reminds me of this intimate connection that I've had with God. And personal worship grows our faith. Intimate worship grows our faith. And we've been talking about all of these different ways over the last few weeks that we can grow our faith. And we've talked about how prayer grows our faith, how fasting grows our faith, how reading scripture grows our faith, and then how loving service grows our faith. And today we want to talk about how personal worship, how intimate worship grows our faith in God. And unfortunately, I think far too many times when we talk about worship, the first thing that we think of is Sunday morning worship. Sometimes people, the first thing they think of is just singing. And so I've had people come up to me and they've said, I don't know if I'm gonna like heaven because I don't really like to sing. And we're like, no, that's not, personal worship is so much broader than just singing. And sometimes we just think of worship on Sunday morning, sometimes we just think about it with that specific group of people in that building, within that time frame, singing those specific songs. And it is so much bigger than that. And especially during this time when we're going through all the COVID-19 things, there is not a better time to explore what personal worship could really look like, what personal worship could really be. I think one of the people that does this the best in Scripture is David. And David, we have a lot of his writings. We have a lot of what he says about worship and how he worships God. And he does just a phenomenal job at teaching us what personal worship looks like. And so I want to look at a passage with you this morning. And this passage is found in 2 Samuel. And it says this: At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So the three mighty men broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it from me, O Lord, to do this," he said. "Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives?" And David would not drink it. So one of the things we see first in this passage is that David is homesick. Maybe you think at first he's just thirsty, but he says, "Oh, that somebody would get me a drink from the well near Bethlehem." And so what that means is David is out in the desert. He is out in the wilderness. He is not home, and Bethlehem has always been his home. And he just longs to drink from the water of his home, and he wishes that he was home. And so he just sort of says it out loud, "Oh, that I would be able to drink from the well near Bethlehem." But the thing about that is that his mighty men, they hear this and they decide to do something about it. And so they actually go and they attack the Philistine garrison. They attack the Philistines in order just to get water for David. And they get the water and they bring it back to David. And they put it at his feet and they say, here you go, we got it for you. And David will not drink it. Instead, what he does is he takes the water and he pours it on the ground. And I think what are these men thinking in that moment? They're thinking, we attacked the Philistines and you just pour this on the ground. But he poured it out in worship. It was his expression in worship. And he is saying, God, this is too valuable for me. This is too important for me. This means too much for me to receive the blessing of this. And so I'm going to give it to you. And so he pours it out before God in worship. And so one of the things I want us to see first is that expression of worship can be so many different things. It can be pouring out something to the Lord. It can be praying to God. It can be singing. It can be doing many, many different things, lifting holy hands to Him. All of these things can be worship. But it's not just singing for an hour on Sunday morning. It can be so much more than that. And certainly He wants us to do that. He wants us to come together as one church. But He also wants us to have this intimate worship with Him. This isn't the only thing that we discover about David in this passage. I think that in Psalm 63, he writes Psalm 63 right after he pours out this water before the Lord. And I want to read with you the first few verses of that. You are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and glory, because your love is better than life. So I think David pours out this water before the Lord, and essentially what he says is yes, I was thirsty for water. Yes, I was homesick. I was thirsty for home. But then he writes down, he says, Lord, I am more thirsty for you than I am for home. I am more thirsty for you than I am for water. And so he writes, in a dry and thirsty land, in this desert that I live in, I am more thirsty for you than anything else. And then I think he realizes that he's not just homesick for Bethlehem, he's actually homesick for God. And he starts remembering the times that he's seen God in the sanctuary. He starts remembering the times where he has seen God and just seen the beauty of the Lord and gazed upon the beauty of the Lord. And all of a sudden he realizes that God's love is better than anything else, that God's love is better than life itself. And so what David discovers in that moment is the reason for his personal worship. He discovers the reason for his intimate worship. And he just sort of outlines it and says, this is why I pour it out before you. And you get this sense that when you read the rest of that psalm, that David is able to worship God in such a way that it leaves him different. And when we are able to pour out our expression to God in worship, when we're able to pour out our reason to God in worship, what happens is that, the part of our soul that seems a little bit adrift or, anxious or worried begins to find rest on the foundation of God's love. It just sort of stops being anxious. It stops being restless. And it just sort of drops on the foundation of God's love. And we're at rest and we're at peace. And so my hope for you, San Jose, is that you know how to do this. And if you have not really done personal worship before and you're thinking to yourself, I've never done this, I don't know what this looks like, and maybe you're feeling guilty for the fact that you haven't done this, don't. Instead, be excited that there is a whole new way to grow your faith that you have never experienced before. And so my prayer for you today is that you fuel your faith with intimate worship. Is that you find a way, you find an expression, you find a reason to fuel your faith in intimate worship so that you may find a rest for your soul. I know not everybody has an idea of what this looks like in their life. And so what we've done is we want to show you in the life of some of our San Jose members what intimate worship can look like. And maybe you can find the best way to express yourself to God, and maybe you can find the best reason for your worship in some of their stories.
Good morning, everybody. I want to spend just a few minutes here this morning speaking to you about my personal worship to God and how that enables my faith to grow. And to me, it's being in lonely places, in relatively quiet places, similar to what we read about Jesus in Luke 5:16, where it says he often went to lonely places where he could pray. And to me, it's nature. You know, God's lovely creation. It gives me great peace to be out here. I like simple hobbies, simple interest, simple, powerful scripture and nature, God's animals, and just to observe them and to meditate and reflect on things godly with them. Now, don't get me wrong, I love being with you guys too. I'm not necessarily a reclusive introvert. I love interacting with you guys every week, getting to know you better, developing meaningful relationships, and meeting new people. I really do. But when I need to get away, I need a way so that I can truly connect with God better and focus on my prayer life and solidify my faith even more. So where do I do that? How do I do that? 3 places mainly. One, the easiest, the most accessible sanctuary is my backyard. I'm out there every day with the trees and the birds and the animals. Those of you that have been to my house, I can sit there and hear God's voice in the singing of the cardinals, the screeching of the hawks, the chirping of the squirrels, the pecking of the woodpeckers. That's my sanctuary. I would much rather be out there than in front of the TV. The second place is on the river, down in DeLand on the St. Johns River. Beautiful, pristine wilderness down there. You saw it a couple of weeks ago when I filmed the welcome from there. My family took me down there for the first time 57 years ago, and I've gone every year since then. Now I'm blessed to live very close to it, so I can go down there 6 or 7 times a year to enjoy it. But again, the beautiful place that is, I can see God in the reflection off the water, in the fish that jump, in the manatees that swim gracefully by, just the abundance of wildlife, the ospreys, the bald eagle, the deer, the wild turkey, the hogs. I could go on and on. But the bull gator, that's something that's incredible to see. I have so many wonderful memories of being down there with my family, past, present, and future. Moreover, I've been able to expose so many of my friends to that area, and when I do, I really truly feel like I'm sharing my faith, or at least a part of it with them. Last place is in the woods, kind of like we are here now. Most of you know that I'm a deer hunter, not as avid as I used to be, but I love being in the woods deer hunting or just being out here like we are right now. I grew up Northwest Florida. My grandparents had a farm. I spent all my days running the woods on that farm, and you know, as you can see, I even have a camouflage Bible, and my favorite devotional book is A Look at Life from a Deer Stand. So this is real, y'all. But running those woods as a kid, you know, seeing God's nature and how it worked all fit perfectly, I learned a great deal. I can't spend time out in places like this and not come away better connected. I just can't do it. James 4:8 becomes alive to me in coming near to God, and He'll come near to you. Micah 6:8, you know, what does the Lord want from me? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with Him. This works for me. Perhaps it might for you if you don't enjoy it already. See you soon.
I'm a wife and a mom, and I work full time, and that leads to a life of chaos. And how in the world am I supposed to find time when there's so much to do to sit down and have quiet time and personal worship with God? Because things are so chaotic, I don't have a lot of sit down quiet time. I've had to figure out how to take my personal worship with God and make it work for me on the go. One of the ways that I found that I can fit God into my daily routine is listening to some worship music, or even a spiritual podcast, or just Christian music in general while I drive in my car. It kind of puts me in a good headspace for my day, and it helps focus my mind on God and keep my mind on God. Or if I'm having a really bad day, it helps me just bring God into that day altogether. One of the songs that I listen to is Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. I chose that song because one of the first verses in it, or one of the first lines, is tune my heart to sing thy grace. And I think that's so important because often I was finding that I wanted God to pull me out of a situation or change the situation, when really what I needed to focus on was literally tuning me to change myself to be able to have joy in that situation or a particular situation. Another song that I like to do is It Is Well With My Soul, for many of those same reasons. And I think that that song is a very strong reminder that our sin is all forgiven, and it's not just a little bit, but all of it. And that God is going to come back and it will all be well with our souls. The third song that I listen to kind of uplift me is 10,000 Reasons. And again, for many of those same reasons, it reminds me that no matter what has gone on, like the song says, no matter what happens during the day, I want to be singing and I want to have joy when the day is done. If I don't have time to be alone in my car, or the reality of a mom or anybody is that we do have chores and we do have exercise that we're supposed to be doing. During those times, I'll put my headphones in and listen to a podcast, or I will put my headphones in and listen to music while I do those things, while I vacuum, while I scrub toilets, while I do all the other mother things and wife things that I have to get done. It's changed my relationship with God in that I look to Him more throughout my day, and I look to say quick prayers with Him more throughout the day, and He's included in more of my day this way for me than He was before when I was trying to add Him onto my day. I spent a lot of time worrying that the time that I was spending with God didn't look like what everyone else seemed to be doing. I thought that I had to do it one specific way, and when I changed my mindset to it being the way that works for me, that's when it changed everything and made it easier to achieve, easier to do, and I found myself wanting to do it instead of dreading doing it at the end of a day when I was just exhausted. I just want to encourage moms or dads or full-time workers or anybody who thinks that their life is too chaotic or too hectic to fit in what they think worship should look like. If you let go of it having to be perfect, it can still be perfect. It just may not look the way that you thought it would look. I didn't think that I was going to be riding around in a car singing worship songs, and I do it all the time, and now I love it, and that makes me feel closer to God. I know that you all can look at your day and find some way to bring God into it and find intimate worship with Him.
So hopefully you were able to see that in the lives of some of our members that this isn't some big and scary thing. This is something that you can do, and it can feel like you, whether it's in the woods or between the routine of life or on the beach. Choose the expression that fits you and your personality. And then maybe they were able to help you find the reason that you can worship that has gone unsaid for too many years. But my prayer is this, San Jose, is that you find the expression, that you find the reason for your worship so that you can find rest for your souls. My prayer for you is that may you fuel your faith with intimate worship.